Now, last but not least, Senator Bernie Sanders is here. All right. Senator Sanders has been a member of Congress for 3 decades. In the House and in 2007 in the Senate. He's got a great message, and he's most importantly involved in making sure we save our pensions. He is a sponsor of the Butch-Lewis Act. Let's hear it for Senator Bernie Sanders.
Senator Sanders, welcome to Cedar Rapids and to the Teamsters Forum.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you just tell the folks in the House why a Teamster ought to vote for Bernie Sanders?
Well, first of all, congratulations for staying awake all day. And I gather I'm the last, and I'm sure you're delighted to hear that. Let me just say this. There are some very good candidates running for President of the United States, and many of them are friends of mine. But I think at the end of the day, if you study the record, you will find that there is no candidate running for President of the United States who is more pro-labor than Bernie Sanders. I have been in the Congress, the House, and the Senate for a long time. I have a pro-labor voting record of 100%. But it is not just how you vote. I have been on more picket lines with striking workers than I suspect all of my opponents combined. That is what I do. Some of my friends and colleagues talk about being pro-worker, that's good, but they voted for some of the worst trade agreements in the history of this country. I am proud to tell you that not only did I vote against NAFTA and PNCR, but I led the effort against those disastrous trade agreements. And as president, we are going to have a policy of fair trade, not unfettered free trade. And that means we're not going to have American workers forced to compete against desperate people around the world who are trying to make it on $1 or $2 an hour. And by the way, when large corporations decide to throw American workers out on the street, when they give their CEOs 100 times more in salary than they pay their workers, and then they get online to try to get a federal contract, well, they've got another guest coming. Ain't gonna happen. If we are going to end the 45-year-old decline of the American middle class, where today, in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, where 3 people on the top own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. If we are going to do that, we're going to have to rebuild the trade union movement in this country. There are millions of workers in America today who want to join a union, but are unable to do so because of the illegal acts of their employers. And that is why I have introduced the Workplace Democracy Act, which is the strongest pro-labor legislation ever introduced in the modern history of this country. And what it says, very briefly, what it says, if 50% of workers in a bargaining unit plus one sign a card saying they want to join a union, they will have a union. And if the employer refuses to negotiate a first contract, there will be serious penalties against that employer. And our legislation ends Section 14B of Taft-Hartley, which will end all so-called right-to-work laws in this country. And I know all of you are concerned about the multi-employer pension plan. And I want you to know, working with Jimmy, we worked together, we had meetings in the Capitol, that working together, what I tried to do is to stop that disastrous provision in the omnibus bill. And I ended up voting against that omnibus bill precisely because I will not tolerate workers losing pensions when they had paid into that pension plan for their entire work life. In recent years, we have taken on Amazon, I've taken on Disney to raise the minimum wage there to at least $15 an hour. And we've introduced the legislation in Congress for a $15 an hour minimum wage and equal pay for equal work for women. So I'm here just to say this. To me, being pro-worker, pro-union is not a new idea. I didn't poll test it. I've been doing it my whole life. My job as president is not to say, well, on one hand, we got the corporate interest, on the other hand, we got the workers' interest. That ain't my style. If elected president, we're gonna have a workers' government in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Senator, we have a question from one of our members via video. This question is posed by Trish Muir. Trish and members of Local 104 are on strike at Asarco Mining at the Mission Complex in Arizona. And her issue, her question, is about trade policies that work for workers.
Hi, my name is Trish Muir. I'm with Teamsters Local 104, and I'm coming to you from the Asarco strike line in Tucson, Arizona. My question for you is, if elected president, how will you enforce trade agreements and protect collective bargaining rights, especially as they pertain to the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement? Thank you.
One day longer! One day longer!
Those guys have been on strike now for several months, is that correct? Yeah, all right. As I indicated earlier, current trade agreements have been written behind closed doors by the CEOs of large corporations. That's just a fact. And unions and workers have been kept out of those negotiations. And the theory behind unfettered free trade is that it's just wonderful. Isn't it just terrific that we have a great global economy? But behind that theory is the understanding that corporations can make a hell of a lot more money by paying workers $2 an hour rather than $30 an hour. And I will never forget, as long as I live, when I was in the House, in opposition to NAFTA. We went down to Mexico, the Macadillo area. Do you know what that is? That's the special place near the border in Mexico where they welcome foreign factories. I went down there. Never forget this. Maquiladora area. You go there and there's beautiful factories, General Electric, you name it. And then you find beautiful, modern, state-of-the-art factories. And then you walk a half mile away to where the workers were living. They were living literally in cardboard shacks. Well, as President of the United States, I'm going to stand up for workers abroad, and I'm going to stand up for workers in the United States of America. We don't believe in a race to the bottom. Right now, if you can believe this, the average worker in America today, after 45 years of an increase in worker productivity and explosion of technology, every one of you is producing far more than workers did 45 years ago. And yet the average worker today is not making a nickel more in real inflation accounted for wages than he or she did 45 years ago. It is time that we had a government that stood with the working class of this country and not just wealthy campaign contributors, and I will be that president.
Senator, you talk about workers' rights, and you talk about that you say you've done more for labor than any of the other Democratic candidates. If you are elected president, how do you reverse the demonization of unions and union workers that has taken place, especially by the right and this current administration?
Well, the truth is, you're absolutely right, that for 45 years, we have seen a concerted effort to break unions, to weaken unions, to demonize unions. But despite all of that, because so many working class people in this country are struggling economically, despite all of that, unions today are more popular than they have been for many, many decades. And what you are also seeing now is workers standing up and fighting back in a way that I have not seen for a very, very long time. You have teachers in conservative states who are saying to their governors, don't give tax breaks to billionaires and cut education in our states. You have nurses standing up fighting for their own patients. So I think despite the demonization and the attack against the union movement by the right wing and corporate America, the American people understand one very simple fact. They don't need a PhD in economics to understand it. If you are a member of a union in America today, you make a hell of a lot more than a non-union worker. And you have better benefits and you have more dignity on the job. And the legislation that we have introduced anticipates that we will double the number of people in unions in a 4-year period, because we're going to open the door for workers to be able to join unions and stop the illegal activities of their employers in preventing that.
Thank you, Senator. I'm especially delighted to call on a questioner here from Cedar Rapids, who Stephanie Griffin is a member and an employee at Teamsters Local 238, and her father Lawrence Koch is a member and retiree of Local 238, and her issue is pensions.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for being here today. As I already stated, my name is Stephanie Griffin. I am a proud Teamster member, and this handsome man next to me is my dad, a proud Teamster retiree. He has 30 years of service as a truck driver. He first started working for Hubbard Feeds. He would deliver animal feed to various customers over a 4-state area. When I was a little girl, there were times that I got to go right along with my dad. And it was really awesome to ride in that big truck. I still remember the smell of the animal feed. I love that smell. I don't know if anybody else here in Iowa feels that way, but I do. And it meant a lot to watch him work so hard and have pride in his work, and I will never forget those experiences. Hubbard Feeds eventually closed, and he worked for a brake company as a driver, and he retired from King's Material as a cement truck driver. Over those 30 years, he paid into the Central States Pension Fund so that he could retire with pride and dignity, and that is no longer the future that he sees. I too pay into the Central States Pension Fund and have for 18 years. I should probably be concerned with myself and what I will do to make ends meet if I don't have that pension, but my concern is solely with my dad. Sorry. This truly is a crisis for our family and hundreds of thousands of other families who are looking to lose their pensions and their incomes. Please share your plan to shore up the pension funds so that my dad and thousands of other retirees, including many people sitting in this room, can stop worrying about losing their incomes and their livelihoods and get back to enjoying their retirements.
Thank you so much. All of you have been involved in negotiations with your employer. You sit down and you negotiate a contract. Sometimes you get what you want, and sometimes you don't get what you want. But you know what the deal is. You know what happened when you leave the bargaining table and when you sign the contract. What is particularly outrageous and disgusting about what happened some 5 years ago in terms of the legislation that allowed for massive cuts to people's pensions is that a promise, a fairly sacred promise, made to thousands and thousands of workers, that promise was broken in an incredibly callous way. So in other words, if I negotiate a contract with you and you only get 2%, you wanted 5%, you're unhappy, but you know the deal. But when your father and you are paying in year after year, giving up wage increases, giving up health care benefits, you're paying in because you want to know that when you retire, you're going to be able to retire with security and dignity. And then, through no fault of your own, one day you'll learn that in the middle of the night, quite literally, as part of a big omnibus spending bill, a provision was put in there which says that pensions could be cut 30, 40, 50%. That is disgusting. That is outrageous. That is not acceptable. You don't make promises to workers. You don't have workers paying in year after year after year and then suddenly have the rug pulled out under them. Now you ask me what I will do. Well, we have introduced legislation similar to Butch-Lewis. It's a little bit stronger. But here is a promise I make to you without the slightest hesitancy. My Secretary of Treasury, under which this whole thing lies, will never allow for a cut to a pension when that worker was promised that pension. It will not happen. And this is a promise that's not that hard to keep. Remember, a couple of years ago, Trump and his friends gave $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% and large corporations. What we're talking about here is a gap of some $30 billion. $30 billion is a lot of money, but compared to $1 trillion tax break for the rich, ain't so much money. So that is $30 billion that we can come up with to make those pensions whole, and I will, in fact, do that. And the reason, as I said a moment ago, that I voted against that omnibus bill was precisely because that provision was in there.
Thank you, Senator. In Iowa, the right-wing legislature funded by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, has gutted collective bargaining laws, and public employee unions used to be able to negotiate over 17 categories. Now they've reduced it to one, pay only. Also in that bill, it makes negotiating for health insurance actually illegal, even if the local school board or city council wants to negotiate health insurance, it's illegal. Doesn't that really obviate the need for single payer as you propose?
Well, two things. Number one, the labor law legislation that I have introduced will allow any worker in America to go on strike when the union wants to go on strike. Do we want federal workers to be striking? Do we want state workers? Do we want teachers to be striking? Of course not. We want negotiations to take place by which workers can get a decent contract. But if you take away the right to strike, what leverage does a worker have? Second of all, in terms of healthcare, let me just say this. And somebody here can tell me if I'm wrong, but I have the strong feeling that every time you sit down at the bargaining table, the key issue that comes up is the cost of healthcare. Is that right? All right. So the employer will say, well, I can't afford this wage increase because the cost of healthcare is going up, so you got a choice. No wage increase, or we'll cut your healthcare benefits. Is that kind of what's on the table? All right. We are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee healthcare to all people as a human right. I believe, given the fact that we've been talking about universal healthcare in this country since Teddy Roosevelt 100 years ago, FDR, Truman, Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Obama, we've been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And right now, the function of our healthcare system is nothing less than to make the drug companies and the insurance companies huge profits. It is time, in my view, to understand that healthcare is a human right, and I will fight and pass a Medicare for all single-payer system.
Senator, you talked about your goal of your plan, workplace democracy plan. You talked about it doubling union membership. You want to do that in your first term as president. You talked earlier about how you go about achieving that. But I want to hear, and I think everyone here also does, what effects do you think it would have on our workforce if it is successful?
Right now, in the richest country in the history of the world with a so-called strong economy, half of our workers are living paycheck to paycheck. You all know that? Paycheck to paycheck. People worried about whether they're going to be able to put food on the table, go to the doctor when they're sick, pay their rent. We have millions of people who are working 2 or 3 jobs. I was here in Iowa a few years ago talking to a guy who collects food to give to an emergency food shelf, and I asked him, who goes to the emergency food shelf? Turns out 90% of the people are employed. But here in Iowa, you got a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. How does somebody live on $8, $9, $10 an hour? So when we strengthen the trade union movement, we are raising wages in this country. When we raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, we'll go a long way to ending poverty. When we make sure that women get equal pay for equal work, we'll be raising the salaries of women all over this country. When healthcare is a human right, every one of us will be in better shape. When we make public colleges and universities tuition free, It means that all of our kids, regardless of the income of our families, will be able to get a higher education, not just college, but trade schools to learn the skills they need as well. What we have got to do ultimately is understand that we are living in a nation which has more income and wealth inequality than at any time since the 1920s. We have a political system which is largely corrupt because it is dominated by billionaires who can make unlimited amounts of campaign contributions and in fact are electing candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. What our job is right now in this moment in history is to demand that we have governmental policy that works for all of us, the elderly, the children, the working people of this country, not just the 1% and wealthy campaign contributors.
Senator, lastly, would you grace us with your closing remarks?
Not to get you nervous, because you already know it. We are living in an unprecedented moment in American history. We have a president who is a fraud, who's a pathological liar, who's a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, a religious bigot. A president who went to the American people 3 years ago and he said, you know, I'm going to stand with the working class of this country. I'm a different type of Republican. Hey, I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Remember he said that? Take a look at his budget. Massive cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and cuts to Social Security as well. He's a president, a candidate. 4 years ago he said, Donald Trump, I'm going to provide health care to everybody. And then he pushes legislation which, if he had gotten one more vote, would have thrown 32 million people off the health care they have today. This is a president who lambasts undocumented people. Oh my God, terrible undocumented, undocumented. He is a guy who has hired undocumented people in all of his resorts. This is a guy who says, I want to create jobs in America. And yet his own companies are manufacturing Trump products in Turkey and all over the world. Hey, Mr. Trump, you want to create jobs in America? Bring your own production back to the United States. We need to do so much in this country in these difficult moments. And it's not just defeating Trump. Obviously, we've got to do that. We got to rebuild the middle class. We got to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. And when we do that, our roads, our bridges, our water systems, we create millions of good paying jobs. We got to build the affordable housing that our people desperately need. We got to deal with the global crisis of climate change. And when we do that, we create millions of jobs as well. Bottom line is, and what this campaign is about, is telling the billionaire class that their greed is unacceptable. And we are going to take them on. We are going to create an economy. We are going to create an economy that works for the vast majority of the people, not just the people who have the money and the power. So our campaign is about beating Trump, it's about winning here in Iowa, it's about all of those things. But it is about something more. It is about transforming our country, the wealthiest country on earth, so that all of our people have a decent standard of living and can live in dignity and security. And in that goal, I look forward to working with the trade union movement to make that happen. Thank you all very much.